Hi and welcome to today's episode, which is going to be all about trying to make a highly nutritious but minimal effort meal with COVID. I'm currently on day 5 of testing positive for COVID. I spent the first 3 days in bed feeling awful. Yesterday started feeling a bit better, and then today I thought, right, I need to get up and do something because I'm starting to go a bit stir crazy. So I thought, well, I need food, so I'll do a bit of filming. Why not? As a quick aside, I'm not an advocate for pushing yourself physically when you're sick. Just give yourself, and your body the rest it needs to recuperate. But I've been shoveling fruit and veg in my face, and I'm feeling like I've got a bit of energy to do a small amount of cooking. So please don't just try and chug through it, because you're just going to make it last longer. So the plan for today is to make a cacciatore. Now, cacciatore means hunter in Italian. Classically, it's a dish that people, while they were out hunting, would grab a rabbit and bung it in a pot with some tasty things. I had this for the first time at a writing course a few years ago, and they did it with tofu. So it's like a tomato-based stew kind of thing with onions, peppers, lots of delicious tasty things. So I thought that's kind of nice and quick to do. Then I thought it'd be ideal to not have to stand over the stove and do anything, and remembered that my Instant Pot's got a slow cooker function on it. So I thought, well, I'll just stick everything in a pot and then walk away from it. I'm going to start off with 2 onions. Now I'm going to saute these down in the pan, but that's not a crucial step, so if you don't want that extra work, don't worry about it, just put them in raw. But cooking them, like sauteing them, browning them off a bit, gives some extra flavour. So I'm just going to do it very quickly in the Instant Pot using the saute function. I'm going to leave the root end on just to make it easier to hold. Slice the other end off, down the middle. I'm using 1 white and 1 red. That's just because that's what I've got in the cupboard. So, but use whatever type you like. And then just peel off the outer layer. You want to take off the tougher skin. And then I'm just going to do a very simple slice on these. So about that sort of width is what I'm going to go for. I'm adding a good splash of olive oil into the Instant Pot liner, maybe half a tablespoon, something like that. Tip the onions in. So I'm doing it on the saute function on a medium normal heat, and just keep stirring that every few minutes to mix everything so it gets a bit coated in the oil. And I'll carry on chopping the other bits and pieces. I've got technically 5 carrots, but it's probably the equivalent of maybe 2 large ones, something like that. So I'm just doing kind of bite-sized chunks on these. Nothing needs to be precise or even. This is all about quick and fast and tasty. I haven't peeled the carrots, I just gave them a wash and a scrub, but feel free to peel them if you prefer that. I just like the intensity of the flavour that's in the skin. Now that the onions are sizzling away, I'm going to drop in a little bit of salt. I'll do maybe half a teaspoon, something like that. And that's going to help draw moisture out of the onions and help them caramelise. And it also provides a good bit of seasoning as well. And just keep cooking that down till they get a bit of colour on them. I've got 4 celery stalks, so I'm just going to do those again, just very rough chop. I'm going to use a red bell pepper, so I'm just going to slice that end off. That stalk usually falls out, if not pull it out. Put that to the side, and then just pull out the middle bit with all the seeds in it. Cut it in half, and then cut that into chunks. Cut the white part out just because it's a bit bitter, but you can leave that in if you want. That's not a problem. Could probably do this a bit more evenly, but it's rough and ready. It's all good. So, bite-sized kind of pieces. On the top part, if you can see that white bit there, so I'm just going to cut that out. Again, just because it's a little bit bitter. And then just chop that into a few pieces. So it's time to start building the cacciatore. So you can see the onions are all glistening and soft, a little bit brown in places. So there's a bit of extra flavour going on. Then I'm going to dump in the veg. I'm going to use these, which are made from textured soy protein. So the great little things that I picked up from the Chinese supermarket. You just add them to liquid and it rehydrates. So they're like little flakes, and yeah, you just soak them in water for a while and they plump up. And they're very meaty in texture, really nice. Dump the bag in. It's not a whole bag, I have had some of these before, but it's about 100 grams or so. So that's I don't know, 2 cups maybe. I'm doing about a half teaspoon of dried chili flakes, just to clear the nasal passages. I'm gonna do half a teaspoon of garlic granules at this stage, and I can always add a bit more at the end. I don't have any fresh garlic, otherwise I'd use that. Teaspoon of dried mixed herbs. So I think this one's thyme, marjoram, oregano, sage and basil. But just use anything you like. Just want some nice kind of Mediterranean type flavours going on in there. Picked up a big pot of Old Bay seasoning from Costco. It's not something I've seen in the UK before. Typically it's more of an American type spice seasoning. I'll do a half teaspoon at this stage, and I can always add in a little bit more at the end. Do a quick grind of black pepper, maybe 1/4 teaspoon. I'm going to use some chicken flavour stock powder. I use the Massel brand. Heap teaspoon, thereabouts. And squeeze in a good amount of tomato puree, a couple of tablespoons maybe. That just really intensifies the kind of tomato rich tanginess that we want. I'm going to add in a can of chopped tomatoes. I'll see once it's in if that's going to be enough or if I might need another one. Pour those in. And then I'll rinse out the can with water and put that in. So pour that in. Add another can of water. And then I'm adding about 1/4 of a can of vermouth, just to give it some white wine flavour. Give that a stir and then see if it needs anything else. And to make sure there's enough liquid, because these pieces are going to suck up a load of liquid. Oh, that's zingy. I think it's fine for now. Might need a touch extra salt, but I'll put that in at the end rather than over seasoning it. So back over to the Instant Pot. I don't have the proper like slow cooker lid for the Instant Pot, but one of my other pan lids just fits it. I'm going to try 4 hours at normal and we'll see what that does. This is my first time using the slow cooker function, so I don't really know what I'm doing with it. This is how we find out, right? Got 5 little shiitake mushrooms here that are dried. I keep these in the cupboard, partly for cooking and eating as a mushroom, but also grinding them down and using it as a flavouring. So it just gives a nice kind of umami-ness. So I'm just going to cover them in boiled water. And then I'll just put a little thing on top of them just to keep it pinned in the water, make sure everything absorbs. And then I'll probably mix things around after an hour or so. And then the soaking liquid, which is called liquor, that can then go into the stew as well, just a bit of extra flavour. I'm going to pop in some little capers. They've just got a really nice zingy, bright kind of, they're a little bit like olives, but different. So I think I'm going to chop it down slightly, just so then it goes a bit further. Got maybe a heaped teaspoon, something like that. Work the knife through it a little bit. I don't want it tiny, but just slightly less big. This type is called cappuccino, so these are very small. So if you can only find the bigger ones, that's fine, just chop them down more. I'm also going to pop in some black olives. If there's anything in here that you don't like, just leave it out. It's your meal, so put in whatever you like. But I love black olives in tomato-based dishes. It just tastes incredible. They give a real kind of deep, intense flavour. So I'm just going to cut those in half, but you can do them any size you want. These ones are pitted, which makes the job considerably less work than if they weren't. If you can only find ones that have got pits in them, I'll stick a link to the olive tapenade video that I did. And it kind of has a sort of easy-ish way of getting the pits out. So you just rock the knife over it until the stones kind of slide out. I think I'm going to serve this up with some quinoa, just plain boiled quinoa, just so it's a little bit of kind of bland flavour to go with all that boldness. But then the quinoa's got loads of really good nutrients in it, all 9 essential amino acids. Lots of really good things in there that will help boost my recovery, hopefully. Now it's just a case of waiting for the slow cooker to finish. So I'll probably keep an eye on it and maybe stir it a couple of times. The only thing I'm worrying about is, so Instant Pots have got a thermostat, and because tomatoes have got a tendency to cake on the bottom of the pan, sometimes if you get a build up, it shuts the Instant Pot down. So I might just, keep coming in periodically and just scrape the bottom a little bit, just to make sure nothing catches. But yeah, we'll see. It's 4 hours later. I've been outside in the sun reading my book, having a nice old time. So let's have a look at the Instant Pot, see what it's doing. So I've stirred it a few times, just to be extra careful that nothing was going to catch, but everything feels fine. And everything's nicely cooked through. So if I spear the carrot, You just want it to slide in with no resistance, and then you know it's ready. Check one of these pieces. Yep, that feels fine and very hot. What I'll do next is thicken up that sauce. If you've got the time and the patience, you can just boil it off for like 15-20 minutes, just let it vigorously bubble away, and that with the lid off, and that will thicken the sauce. But I read a trick using chickpea flour, so I'm going to give that a try, see what happens. If you haven't got chickpea flour, gram flour, you can use cornstarch. Just make a slurry with cold water and a few spoonfuls of the cornstarch, mix it together and then add spoonfuls of that until it's the desired thickness. I'm going to make a slurry with the gram flour. It's very lumpy and it can be hard to get the lumps back out, so I'm going to try and sieve it first. I'll sieve 2 tablespoons, mix that with enough water so that it's liquid, and then, yeah, and then take it from there. It's very trial and error, this one. Work it through the sieve. I'm just going to add tablespoons of water until it's a liquid. So I'll start with 3, see what happens. Let's give that a whisk. So that's 3 tablespoons of water. I think that might be okay actually. Yeah, I've decided to bring it up here just so it's a bit easier. So I'm going to use the saute function, just have it on normal again, just to heat everything well. Those are the mushrooms that I soaked, so they've gone really nice and soft and pliable. So I'll just slice those down. I cut the stalk out just because that can be a bit tough sometimes, but it's going to depend on what type of mushrooms you use. Drop in the mushrooms, and then the black olives, and then the capers. Give everything a good stir together. And the smells coming out here are incredible. I'll let that bubble away for a couple of minutes just to, you know, get everything up to heat again. I want the sauce slightly thicker because at the moment it's just kind of soupy, and I want it a bit thicker, a bit richer. I'm going to check the flavour of this now, just while it's more liquid, just because then it's easier to mix everything in. Yes, that's really good. I'm going to put in a bit more tomato puree. I'm also going to pop in maybe another small pinch of salt, so 1/4 teaspoon maybe, something like that. I'm also going to pop in some MSG, monosodium glutamate. So it adds a lot of savoury flavour but without loads of sodium, so it's much more healthful than salt but packs a real punch full of flavour. So I'll pop in about 1/2 teaspoon of that. Turn the saute down to less now because it's just getting a bit fierce. And we'll start dropping in the chickpea flour. I'm going to pour it in with one hand and try and stir well with the other hand. We'll see how that goes. So kind of scatter it and start stirring straight away. Let's do one at a time. And then that's going to need to cook for a good couple of minutes to get the chickpea flour cooked. It's definitely thickening up. I might pop another 2 in. One at a time though, just so I can stir. So I think that's probably pretty good to go. Because what I want is for the kind of wet part, the saucy part, to sort of cling to anything that it's on. So quinoa in my case. But by all means take it, you know, get it as thick as you want it. Here's dinner, all ready to be consumed and looking yum. I didn't add the mushroom liquor in the end, just because it's a very potent kind of flavour, and because I've put the mushrooms in there as well. I just didn't want to overpower it. Too much of it tastes a little bit skunky. If you live in a part of the world where you have skunks, it's just that kind of real intense sort of, yeah, smell and taste that you can't quite shift. Not unpleasant, it's not as unpleasant as skunk, don't worry. But yeah, it's there. So I thought rather than overpowering all those other delicate, more delicate flavours that I put in there, I'd just have the mushrooms in there and dive in. So the amount of effort I had to put into that's ridiculously tasty. I was a bit worried that doing the slow cooker wasn't going to get quite as intense in flavour as it would on the stove, but that's just wonderful. As I've mentioned, if I've used any ingredients that you don't like, skip it, it's fine. But I do recommend keep trying things that you don't like every year or so, because taste buds do change. Like I used to hate peppers as a kid, and then it wasn't until I hit my 30s that I suddenly thought, oh no, that is really good actually. Flavours are all really deliciously balanced. There's just enough heat in there, just so it's sort of a little tingle on the palate rather than being a big punch around the face. But you can skip that, or you can quadruple the quantity if you want something fiery, not a problem. The olives and capers in there just give it a really nice kind of, I don't know, there's a word and I can't bring it to mind because COVID's addled my brain, but it's kind of a zingy, tangy, little kind of bright notes in there, in with all that flavourful, rich sort of flavours underlying everything. That Old Bay seasoning's worked really well in here. If you can't get hold of that, I will post, I'll see if I can find a list of the ingredients and I'll stick it in there. The textured soy that I went with comes in like, I've got 3 other varieties. So there's like a vegan pork chops, minced fish, which is like little kind of sticks, vegan grilled steak. So that's kind of, I don't want to start reaching in the packets while I've got the COVID because I don't know if that's a sensible thing to do. But the point is, you can get all sorts of different textures, different shapes. So yeah, just change things up. I went into my local big Sainsbury's the other day and they've suddenly got this enormous world food aisle, and I noticed they've got soy curls just on the shelf there. So I think things like this are becoming a bit more widespread. So if you haven't got an Asian supermarket near you, try that. Or you could make some seitan. I'll pop some links down to the wash flour seitans that I've done. That would probably be really nice if you took the chicken drumstick, but just didn't do the drumstick, just made like a breast kind of piece. That would be really nice. If you wanted to swerve the meat substitutes and go for something like a tofu, I'd just be wary of putting tofu in the main pot, because if you're trying to stir it, it's just gonna break the tofu down because it's quite fragile. So maybe pan fry a few slices, however many slices you want, and then add the sauce into that pan. Heat everything through and then serve it like that. In terms of what to serve it with, obviously the quinoa is a great option. There's lots of protein in there as well, so you're getting extra protein hits on top of everything, you know, in the sauce. You could do plain white rice or the red rice that I did with the mushroom bourguignon. That would be delicious. You could do on top of pasta, mashed potatoes. I think traditionally it's served on top of polenta. So I did the sherry mushrooms on cheesy polenta. I'll stick a link to that as well for you. It's just a really lovely, rich, delicious, yeah, I'm wishing I had polenta now. Or the gnocchi that I made, the gluten-free gnocchi, it would be fantastic with that, I think, because the sauce would kind of cling to the dumplings, and then you just got lots of different textures in there. Yes. So lots of options there for you. If you don't have a slow cooker, you can just do it on the stove, I imagine. I can't see why that wouldn't work. You're just gonna have to stir it more often than I did, because otherwise it is gonna catch on the bottom. So once you've got it to the point where I covered it, cover yours, drop it right down to a simmer, and then, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes, something like that, and then stir it every, I don't know, 5-10 minutes maybe. You're gonna know your stove better than I do, but tomatoes especially have a tendency to catch on the bottom of the pan if they're left there in contact with the heat. I will definitely use that slow cooker function again. It's really useful. I mean, I'll be honest, it got to about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and I pulled a carrot out and it was still rock hard. And I thought, oh, this is a problem. Am I gonna have to do it on high? But I thought, well, see it through to the end, see what happens. And it's worked perfectly. So I did the 4 hours on medium heat. So if you wanted to do it before you go to work, just put it on low for 8 hours and it will just do its thing. I'm gonna go toddle off and eat this. So hit subscribe and tap that bell icon if you want more food that's maximum flavour and minimal effort.